Orthodontics, and I'll be your program director for the evening. I humbly request you to stand for the academic procession, and I request that you remain standing for the national anthem by Kaylin Williams. Again, I welcome all of you tonight who graciously accepted this invitation to celebrate the inauguration of Professor Manogari Chetty. A special warm welcome to the Rector, Professor Tyrone Pretorius. I assume it's his last such event. The Deans in attendance, the faculty colleagues, and students of Professor Chetty. And a very warm welcome, especially to Professor Chetty's family. I now call upon the Rector to start the proceedings.
Indeed, it is my last one. Good evening, colleagues, students, distinguished guests, and welcome to this very special occasion where we celebrate the inaugural lecture of Prof. Manogari Chetty. I would like to begin by acknowledging our acting DVC academic, Prof. Sean Pather, the Dean of the Dentistry Faculty, Prof. Jeff Yangerpaul. We are also pleased to welcome tonight the family and the friends of Prof. Chetty, who are here to support her and to celebrate with her accomplishments with us tonight. Since the beginning of our inaugural lecture series for this year, we've had the pleasure of celebrating the accomplishments of many of our outstanding academics. And tonight marks the conclusion of our inaugural series for the year. Personally, I find it very gratifying that we've managed, after the impact of COVID-19, that we've managed to resuscitate and bring back a very important event in the life of any university. Tonight we honor Prof. Chetty for exceptional contributions to the field of dental and craniofacial genetics. I am pleased personally by your title, The Need for the Dentist Scientist. As a former Dean of Health Sciences, I've over the years stressed that unless our interventions are evidence-based, we are nothing more than technicians. Prof. Chetty's achievements have earned her a distinguished place as a full professor at UWC. And we are privileged to share with her in this significant moment in her academic journey. Throughout this lecture series, I have stressed that the term inaugural is somewhat of a misnomer. Inaugural suggests the beginning of something, but in the academic world, it actually represents the culmination of a professor's achievements that have led to this recognition. In this sense, the word inaugural implies a beginning, when in reality it symbolizes a significant milestone. In all universities across the world, it is a rite of passage that recognizes not a beginning, but an arrival. It is a moment to honor years of dedicated scholarship and research. An inaugural lecture marks an academic's elevation to full professor. It acknowledges their role as a leader and as a contributor to their discipline and to the broader academic community. At UWC, inaugural lectures allow us to celebrate the accomplishments of our scholars and to share in the knowledge and insights they bring to our university community. It is for this reason that I am especially pleased to welcome the deans and representatives of other faculties, which signals how highly we regard these inaugural lectures. As we proceed with the program, it is now my pleasure to ask the Dean of the Faculty, Prof. Yangerpaul, to formally introduce Prof. Chetty to this audience. Prof. Yangerpaul.
Thank you, Prof. Pretorius. Thank you for that. And good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to the parents. Good afternoon to the family. Good afternoon to our supporters, the students, etc. This is a momentous day for the Faculty of Dentistry in many ways. We have an individual here that I've come to know quite well over a long period of time because we were classmates. Actually, the class of 1990. There's three of us here actually, and I think I must before I start introducing her, I think speak about the importance of UWC in our lives. Early 80s, 90s was the days of apartheid, and many of us, including Prof. Chetty, myself, and I think Dr. Atimulam was sitting in the audience, were in the same class. We were given the ticket to come and study dentistry at UWC, the University of Western Cape, because there was no training facilities to do dentistry for Indians. And we came on this, there was a quota system. There were 6 Indians that were allowed to come and train at UWC, and we were one of the 6. And UWC gave us the opportunity to become who we are, and we've taken the opportunity to also develop ourselves. And from the class of 1990, we really can be proud of that class. We have the likes of Manogari Chetty, the first research chair in dentistry, the first genetic scientist in dentistry and leading in our field. And obviously, I occupy the post of dean, and we've done very well for ourselves. So, Professor Manogari Chetty is a board-certified oral and maxillofacial pathologist, and she currently the HOD for the Department of Craniofacial Biology, Pathology, and Radiology. She is a full professor in the Faculty of Dentistry and holds a number of qualifications, and I'm not going to go through all. I think there was 7 or 8, Manogari. But just to say that she's got a BCHD from the University of Western Cape. She's a specialist in oral and maxillofacial pathology, and she holds a PhD in human genetics. She's also the director of the African Society of Dental and Craniofacial Genetics, and she's recognized internationally and nationally in the fields of dental genetics and non-communicable diseases, in particular rare diseases which manifest in the head and neck. Having been introduced to the world of human genetics in 2012, several research projects within the field of genetics and molecular dentistry were initiated by Prof. Chetty and our team. And this is the branch of dentistry that focuses on the effects of that inherited genetic variation amongst individuals has on both the risk of developing rare syndromes and common dental diseases and disorders. She employs a dedicated research approach, which actually encourages the development also of a unique category in dentistry, which is the dentist-scientist combination. And she heads a department that's leading this in Africa, to be honest. So it gives me great honor to welcome my friend, my colleague, my HOD, a senior member of my team, and a rising star at the Faculty of Dentistry, Prof. Manogari Chetty.
Okay, so this is Dr. Susan Chandler who's going to be assisting me. It's lovely to see some familiar faces from a long time ago and more recently. And to begin with, we were given sort of a guideline on how we prepared the talk. And one of it was we needed to reflect on our beginnings. So I grew up as a young girl in Durban in a quintessential Indian family, South Indian family. And for some of you that might even not be aware, it was the time where communities were completely segregated at every level. We lived in different areas, we went to different schools, so the opportunity for actually mingling was just not there. I belong to a South Indian family, and as you know, food plays a pivotal role in everything. And secondly, everything's about colorful programs and processes, and obviously I grew up with the traditional Hindu greeting of where we put our hands together. And it was also a time I probably was the last generation of where an Indian mother would come in there, and if you argued or if you wanted to express yourself, she always went, "I'm your mother, I know what's best for you," and then everything stopped. So I think I am the last generation of that. Thereafter, my son came along, he gave me a rude awakening, so we had to go move beyond that. I just want to, at this point, acknowledge my grandmother, who played such an important role in my life. I loved her with all my heart, and she was widowed when she was 32. And her life sort of resonates very closely with mine, because when she was widowed, at that time, she had developed this strong, independent woman. And think about it, in those years, an Indian woman with a strong character standing up for what's right and what's wrong was almost unheard of. So I like to think that I've learned some lessons from her. I've also not been very talkative and a communicative person, so oftentimes I come across as being perhaps antisocial or not expressing myself a lot of times, maybe at meetings. But just know that loud, never assume that loud means strong. So I'm so glad when I actually found this little saying. I did mention that everything was segregated during my time. So even if we went to university, there were only certain universities that we would go to. Prof. Gopal, you probably remember. So as Indians, and I keep saying Indians, but because that's my lived experience, is we had to go to the University of Durban-Westville. And that is for the Indian sort of population from around South Africa. Now in KZN, the University of Natal and the University of the Durban-Westville has merged to become the University of UKZN. But in those days, you can see the vast difference between the buildings of University of Natal, which was for a different sort of population, and then the University of Durban-Westville, which is the picture on that side there. And it was a time of lots of unrest. So wherever you looked on the campus, there was always police vehicles and armed guards trying to keep all the uprisings under control. So let me just move on. After 1986, when I completed a zoology degree, my interest was just being outside in the wild, in the water, animals, wild animals. It was what I grew up with. But when I entered the last year of my BSc degree, where I was now majoring in zoology, the HOD of zoology actually called me in and said to me, there were 3 of us actually at that time, said, the 3 of you need to think of what your career path's going to be. Because in zoology, for Indians, there's not going to be much opportunity. So obviously, we now had to rethink our whole career path. And I applied to do dentistry. My colleague applied to do medicine at WITS, so he got in, and I got in here at UWC. And as Prof. Gopal said, at that time, for the entire country, UWC was the only place we could come and do dentistry. So there were literally 6 places available for all the Indians in South Africa. So you can only imagine the level of competitiveness. I would have killed you to get in. But anyway, so we got in, and once again, my life took a turn for something that I wasn't anticipating. This picture is a little bit aside, so it's not really, it's part of my talk, but if you look at the picture up there, that's our class. So the days of 80 students in the class, that's only recently. In my class, I think it was, 18 or 20? And Prof. Gopal, you were the one sitting down there looking very pleased with yourself. Can you see? But your hair was black at that time. And Professor Khan, you can see standing there. And there were only 4 girls in our class at the time. Now, I put the picture next to that, not to highlight anything. Like, I wasn't wanting to say, look how well the females have aged compared to the males. I just wanted you to see, that we've all aged, but some a little bit better than others. So this was in 2022, and Prof. Gopal was now the dean at the Faculty of Dentistry. So just to begin on a little bit of the scientific part of it, right at the turn of the century, right at the beginning, oral health was already being considered an integral part of the overall systemic health of an individual. And Slavkin, right down in 2001, he is considered the father of craniofacial genetics or biology. I'm not sure, I'll have to ask one of them. And he said the future of oral health care and product development requires a close relationship between engineering, material sciences, biology, and genetics. So that tells you right at the beginning, we needed to begin incorporating knowledge of this nature into our programs. And to do that, we started to establish collaborations outside our field. We had to communicate with other people. We needed to adapt to this ever-changing landscape. Okay? And then once I finished dentistry, I went into private practice for almost 12 years, I think, where I did all motherly things. And I had a son that I needed to bring up, so that's a lot of investment that I made there. Just keep that in mind. But I knew at that point the only thing that I would want to specialize in would be pathology. The reason being is dentistry needs a kind of person. It needs a kind of person that is communicative, that's a people's person, that knows how to manage finances and knows how to ask for money if people don't pay. And I had none of those skills. So for me, the best and the only option at that point in time was maxillofacial pathology. And for me, looking down a microscope at this world of interesting things every day, am I right, Johan? Every day, it's a new day with new things that you see. So there's no sense of monotony or anything like that. And I absolutely loved that direction of my life. I then qualified and got a position as an academic in 2010 at the Faculty of Dentistry. So in essence, my academic life and everything I've done only began in 2010. And that happened kind of by default because that's where I found myself. And as an academic, you know that there are certain things that are expected of you. And the pivotal moment in my life was when I met Professor Peter Byton. Professor Peter Byton was a professor in human genetics at UCT. And I met him perhaps at a latter stage in his life, but the one thing that resonated with Prof. Byton and that was almost infectious was he had this, when something excited him, he needed to share it. And he shared everything about human genetics with me, and we'd spend lots of time laughing, so he wasn't this kind of serious person. He was so pragmatic. He'd tell me about his adventures across the Sahara and at Easter Island, and then we'd finally get down to a little bit of work. So it's that kind of, in my opinion, supervisionary, the type of supervisionary acumen that I acquired, because that was all I knew and it was what I loved. So after that, I then registered for a PhD. During that time, Prof. Yengopal, there was no sabbatical at dentistry. It was kind of an unheard of term. I mean, I'm just telling you this, right? So it was a long, lonely journey. I ran a one-man department. It was called oral biology at the time, so which means I didn't get into pathology. I did all the undergrad teaching, all the postgrad teaching. Oh, I've got no sabbatical there. Yes, I've just mentioned no sabbatical. And I was employed with the mandate of upgrading oral biology to align with the expectations of the HPCSA. So it was no mean task. Oh, and then obviously in 2016, it culminated with a graduation. And throughout my PhD journey, you'll see somebody sitting there with a red top, looking particularly pleased with himself, right? That's my son's dad, my partner, my husband. Same thing, because he was my support system during that time. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to, as I go along, acknowledge people and thank people, if that's okay, and not leave it until the end. So I'm done with you now, right? And during that long, lonely time, there were a few ups and downs. I mean, there were a few nice moments. My son, who started off looking like that, ended up looking like he did there with the cap on, graduated dentistry, and I was honored to participate in the whole procession and so on and so on. And then I acquired, if you look up there, that I acquired my absolute best friend in the whole world, and he's still around. So when I rush home after work, that's where I'm going to take care of him. So then the time came where, yes, you've done your dentistry, you've done your pathology and so on, and you've finished with your PhD. You need to now develop a niche. And the niche, to develop a niche, you obviously have to look at a lot of things, and you need to look at what you love. And I knew I loved pathology, and I loved genetics, and what came to you easily. And then what pays well? Now, we all know, many of us here as academics, we don't really get to that point of what pays well, but be comfortable. So getting to that sweet spot is a little bit challenging, but in addition to all of these three things, we needed to look at what the world needed. And coming from Africa, coming from South Africa, coming from the segregations that we experienced, all it did was just sort of enforce for us the reason or the fact that we had to look at Africa. Whatever we wanted to do, we wanted to address the needs of Africa. Okay, so all of this came together, the three disciplines came together, and eventually that gave rise to what I like to call dental and craniofacial genetics. Eventually, as the years went on, we now include various other omics into our discipline. And as Prof said, it is the branch of dentistry that looks at our inheritance. What do we inherit? Our genetic makeup. And more importantly, what goes wrong in our genetic makeup enables us to understand the disease process. All right? So when we do research, we find out what has caused something to go wrong at the level of the gene. But more importantly, we've got to translate that research into the better management of our patients. And that is the part that we refer to as the innovation. Okay, like I said, we focused on Africa. There's many reasons why we focused on Africa. It has the burden of oral disease. And what we did find is that a lot of research takes place in the north, in the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere, the developed countries, have everything. They have finance, they have the resources, so literally they have everything to make it work. And we down here in the south, we're always struggling. So the one thing about dentistry in the south is that the future of evidence-based dentistry in Africa needed us to do research in Africa for Africans. Okay, another reason why we would need to do research in Africa for Africans, basically because the human population of African descent, we have a diverse genetic makeup compared to European populations. Okay, oral health has begun to become important from, I would say, 2016 or perhaps a little bit prior onwards by statements made by the WHO. The WHO eventually recognized disorders like periodontal disease, oral cancer, and so on as priority oral diseases. At that time, there was 480 million Africans that were suffering from oral disease. So, in addition to just non-communicable diseases like periodontitis and oral cancer, a part or a niche area, or a focus area of our research is in syndromes or inherited syndromes, craniofacial syndromes. And what has become evident by some of the work done by Prof. Botali that I've noted down here is that you find a different genetic mutation in the African population compared to what you would find in the European population. And that in itself is telling you that we need research in Africa so that we can treat our population. How do we go about addressing this? Now remember, it's a huge problem. The continent of Africa is huge. We're just a dental school in South Africa, southernmost tip of Africa. But I'd like to say that it's a beginning. We have started the process. And I'm sure that as the years go on, it will build throughout sub-Saharan Africa. I've already said we need research in Africa for Africans. Now, we're all clinicians. For us to be able to do the kind of research in the genetics and genomics arena, we've got to upskill to almost the level of scientists, or close to that, or understand the principles of scientific investigations. And that's where we get the reference to a clinical scientist or a dentist scientist. So it's clinicians that actually bridge the gap between the laboratory and patients. And the importance of the kind of research a clinical scientist or a clinician scientist would do, he would do the kind of research that actually is determined by the condition of your patients. So patients have a particular condition. We do research to find ways to manage those patients in a better way. So that's what I mean by translational research. I've already mentioned in Africa why it's so important. The other thing that's quite important is dental schools in Africa, and we've actually done quite a lot of work trying to find out. They have not included information, knowledge on translational clinical research into our undergrad curriculum, because that's where you want to start, or you want to spark the whole interest of research. We went on to build a team because nothing can happen without a team. And at this point, I'm going to acknowledge my team and thank my team, because if I didn't have them, I think we would not have even progressed a quarter way along the line. And like I said, the PhD was a long, lonely journey, so I was not going to do anything on my own after this. I was lucky in the sense that the team that we were able to convene were already upskilling. Each one was in charge of various aspects of research, for example, collaboration, curriculum development, to manage the products and funding applications and so on. And what I must say at this point is, I always thought I was lucky, but I was just advised the other day, we make our own luck. And I think that I made my own luck when I was able to recruit all of you guys and keep you all very selfishly to myself. For example, Dr. Susan Chandler is sitting up there. You'll know who Dr. Susan Chandler is. So she is from Springbok, the Northern Cape. Over the years, we've learned some very choice words from Susan, who's helping me here. And the one thing that I must tell you that I have learned, one of the functions of a team is that you support each other. And whenever I know that I'm going to a difficult meeting or one that's not going to be so easy, she would come there and go, Prof. Chetty, don't go around the bush. You just go through the bush. And then I would be, oh, yes, I'm off to my meeting right now. And then where's Dr. Temilola? He came with his wealth of African knowledge and collaborations. And then we have Iman and Salma. Iman is the one that looks like a model that's sitting on the top. And Dr. Salma Kabashi, they were my wise counsel. Now, if you know anything about Indian women, when they become menopausal, the smallest of things escalates. And I would go to them and I'd be like, and they would give me this wise, don't do anything today. Don't let those fingers start typing on the typewriter. So I would stop. And then there's Dr. Marwa Abaras. But I must, please indulge me on this one. So I traveled to Egypt with Marwa once to a conference. And if you know anything about the Egyptian Cairo airport, you've got to put your huge suitcase when you enter on one of those X-ray things. And there were 2 guards or security people standing there, and we really struggled putting our suitcases up, and they just stood there. And all I saw was Marwa turned around to them, and in Arabic, it was just one line. And I promise you, in the next few minutes or seconds, even the manager was there apologizing to us. And the 2 guards, I think we didn't even have to touch our luggage after that. So yeah, so this is my team. Some of the ways that they have been upskilling, Dr. Salma has just come back or is busy engaged with the Harvard Global Clinical Scholars Program, also translational research. Iman was able to get the Clinician Scientist Fellowship from the SAMRC. And Dr. Temilola came in with a PhD from ICGEB. I'll leave you to read that there. Right. Okay, now this is the most important thing here because you cannot do anything in a department without admin assistance. I'm just looking, Mr. Keenan Smith. Where is he? He's not here? Where? Hello, Keenan. Okay, so I have no doubt. So there's Urina Bota and Keenan Smith, who are actually our admin assistants. And I have no doubt, every single day before they leave home, that this is their prayer. So you guys just take a second to read it, because I have no doubt it's not been an easy feat, right, working with us? Okay, so we've already mentioned translational research. We are going to then focus on non-communicable oral health conditions, and because we're a small team and we're just starting out, our focus was going to be rare diseases, oral cancer, and periodontitis. Okay? One thing that we did do after the PhD was we realized how necessary a referral center was for patients that had genetic conditions. So we were able, through the really hard work of Iman and Salma and other members of my team, set up the Dental Genetics Clinic, which has now been formalized. It is a Raki, here as well, and formalized, and it's a referral clinic for patients with inherited conditions. Now, remember that generally dental schools and maybe other places would have just clinics like the pediatrics clinics, for example, or special needs clinic, and the patients would sort of be embedded within that management. But patients with inherited conditions or genetic conditions need very specialized kind of care. The clinician needs to understand exactly what is going on with the genetic abnormality, and then you treat. Okay, so this clinic, like I said, it's a referral clinic. A lot of our rare diseases research has been on patients that required more research, required more expertise to manage them, and we needed multidisciplinary involvement. Okay? One example is a project that we then registered in our department. It was called the Rare Diseases Project, Enamel Renal Syndrome, and this is a patient. I have got ethics approval and I've got permission from the patient to share these pictures. He came in, and because, like I said, our area of focus is rare diseases, so we have a little bit of knowledge on inherited conditions, we were able to actually make a diagnosis on these patients. So there were about 4 of them. Now remember, rare disease, and if you get 4 patients coming together, that's a lot of patients for rare diseases. We were able to make this diagnosis of enamel renal syndrome. You can see the patients are really compromised. They cannot eat properly. There's no enamel on their teeth. Their teeth don't erupt properly. And if we didn't know, or we didn't have that kind of expertise or knowledge base that we were developing, we would never have known to actually refer these patients for a renal consult. All 4 of them were referred, and all of them had renal abnormalities, which I think which is a part of the syndrome, and which, as the patient gets older, becomes more and more severe. So with rare diseases, we can see that all the scientific, the clinical, public health's kind of been sorted out. The area that we are working on, and this is Iman's brainchild, is the registry design and database establishment, something that is very much needed in the Southern Hemisphere. We don't really have anything, so our reporting lines and things are really compromised. What I'm going to ask at this point, please don't try to read the slides, rather just listen to me talk through it, because then it just becomes too much. So, yeah, just listen. Okay. I'm not going to go into the science, Professor Patha, I'm not going to go into science of these projects, except to tell you that each project has a genetic basis or a genomic basis. I'm going to just highlight very superficially, and then you can make your deductions of what we actually do. So there was a first genomic era, began in 1953. I think it lasted for about 37 years or so, and that was many years ago, and all they did, these 2 scientists, remember that as a human being, you're made up of cells. Each cell has a nucleus. Within the nucleus, you have your chromosomes, and your chromosomes are made of DNA. Devin, do you remember? I know that you weren't paying attention in class. Okay? And it's the DNA that these 2 scientists described, and they called it a double helix. Okay, and that it was just a time where they were just describing things. There was nothing about treatment or anything like that. And then you went into the second genomic era. The second genomic era started in 1990. That is when the whole human genome was being read. They were trying to interpret the whole human genome. It took many years, I think about 13 years, if anything. So imagine looking at every gene in your body, trying to understand what every gene is made up of, which molecules, what is the function of every gene, and what happens when genes go wrong. So that was a long process, and I've got this little book down the bottom there is when they tried to describe the human genome. Apparently, if you had to put all the letters together, or all the molecules together, it was something like 5,000 kilometers. So all of that is recorded in there. So you can imagine the amount of work. Now, we don't work in that arena. That's all been done already. So the area that we are working, and it's called the post-genomic era. So all the genomes been done, all the machines have been invented in terms of trying to read the genomes. What we do is we try to interpret these readings. The important point, or something very important happened during this era. is a lot of these processes happened, like I said, in the global north, where you had all these rich countries. But as these technologies advanced, they became more affordable to developing countries, and that's when we latched on. So obviously, us as developing countries, we're still trying to catch up. We're still trying to catch up to what we call the global north. The one thing that we always struggle with is you will do all your investigations, you will find out what the abnormality is, but you need to translate that into a good innovation, a good management technique, or a point of care device. And that's where the expense comes in. And that's where we really, really struggle. So a lot of our challenges there. Now, I put this here not just to be, please don't try to understand it, to try and impress you or anything like that, but if you think of next generation sequencing, that is the kind of work or the depth of the work or the skill that we needed to upskill to in order to be able to understand things like that. But let's not go there. This is a busy slide. All right, then there came a point where we needed to now develop a larger project so that we could embed umbrella projects underneath this. So this was an overarching one. Non-communicable diseases, rare diseases, focusing on translational research. And within this particular project, there were several projects that we developed, smaller ones. And the view was to firstly try to develop some personalized or targeted therapy. Secondly, we were upskilling the people that were actually doing the research. So when they finished their PhD, for example, they went away with all the skills to be able to understand laboratory techniques, understand research processes, and try to translate their findings into better management of, like I said, their patients. This is just a list, the ones in italics is just a list of projects that are on the go, some of them finished. The latest one I think that finished was Dr. Mark Mayer, your PhD on TMD disorders, looking at the COMT gene. So that was our latest project that has just finished. Iman is busy with fetal alcohol. Oral lymphomas, that was the ones that present in the head and neck, was in Sudan. And unfortunately, that isotope building or that center burnt down during the war, just when they were starting to implement categorization of lymphomas. So all of that, I don't know what's gone on there. Okay, so then it was periodontitis, and there's several projects that we have on the go with periodontitis. The latest one also that has just finished, where the genetic susceptibility to periodontitis in South Africa has been complete. That's a PhD project by Dr. Salma Kabashi. Well done, Salma. And over the years, it was very hard for dentists or for let's say, the medical fraternity to allow dentists within their communities. We were always kind of marginalized. So our relevance wasn't really considered much. And yet, if you look at one kind of condition like periodontitis, which we see fairly often, it has implications in several, medical disorders like preeclampsia, chronic kidney disease, gestational diabetes, and there's many people in the audience that are actually busy with projects of this nature. Okay, so the last one, and this one is Dr. Temilona's brainchild, is we have a really large sub-Saharan African project looking at oral cancer, but looking at the liquid biopsies. So the idea behind this kind of project, please don't try to read it, is to be able to take a test out into rural Africa and do some kind of point-of-care testing to identify a molecule that is suggestive of oral cancer, as opposed to taking a big chunk of tissue out and then doing a immunohistochemical and all of those kind of things. Because in Africa, you don't have those kind of resources. So if we can get a saliva test that we can do, we can then identify patients sooner, give them therapy sooner, and the outcomes of those patients would actually be improved. Oh, let me just go back to that one. So this one, already we have 9 PhD students, so 7 from the rest of Africa. Each student is from a different country. We've got 2, I think, in South Africa, and then 2 postdoc students. Dr. Temilola, who's driving that, is looking at identifying these molecules. But in addition to that, we are going to do genetic and molecular profiling of these molecules. Okay, now comes the best part. We've just come back from a conference in Sun City. It was the Southern African Human Genetics Conference, I think. And it was mentioned at least twice. We in the South and in Africa, we don't have money. So we've got to always think out of the box. We've got to engage our creative thinking, and we've got to think of innovative ways of doing our research and addressing patients and so on and so on. So this is where, and the point here is that no matter how much of innovative thinking you do in the box, even out the box, without money, you just can't do anything. So, Dr. Frederick, at this point, I really want to acknowledge and thank you from the SAMRC, because we've gotten some grants that actually allowed our projects to take off. And if I'm not mistaken, we might be the first dentists to actually receive some money from the SAMRC. But now you see that we're really good and you will give us more money, right? So thank you so much. And then the UWC Research Chair in Dental and Craniofacial Genetics has also received a grant from the Sibusiso Bengu Development Grant. And then the IDR, which is an international research association, we've also been successful in getting a fairly substantial grant from them. So that is that. Now, I'm almost done. So just to add a little bit of relevance to everything I've said. So this is 2024. This is a seminar series where everything was focused on global oral health. And what they said here at this seminar was that since the publication of the first Lancet series on oral health in 2019, global oral health has seen an unprecedented momentum. So that means growth. And what we need to do as oral health practitioners and researchers, we've got to now catch up with that trajectory in terms of our research. Okay, so that kind of gives a little bit of relevance to the work that we are doing. And I thought I must actually include this in because this was published last year. And this is South African statistics, looking at health sciences. And what is a little bit disappointing, and I think we are trying to address, if you look at dentistry, we're right at the bottom. So dentistry, advanced dentistry, oral sciences, the number of PhDs that we actually produce in that arena certainly needs some working on. And I do believe our dean is addressing that, and he always says we need to become global players, and I think that would help us get there. Okay, I'm almost done. Another way forward that we are thinking of sustainability of our dentist-scientist fraternity. We have just formalized the African Society of Dental and Craniofacial Genetics, which can be a standalone, but at this point in time, because we are still fledgling, we've affiliated with the African Society of Human Genetics, but that helps us to spread the word out there. Sub-Saharan Africa, the African Society, when they then have their projects or they have their conferences, we are given a platform. So that highlights and that sort of puts the word out there about the importance of dental and craniofacial genetics. In terms of our department at our faculty, that's another way that we are trying to sustain this whole dental and craniofacial genetics niche. The department was oral biology. We've incorporated all these new technologies, all the new sciences, and we've now emerged on the other side as craniofacial biology and pathology and radiology, and that was a new faculty structure. But the important thing is that we do have a new department with all the new information in it. Our textbooks tell you that we needed to also elevate and sort of align with the rest of the world. And curriculum development. Once again, I must acknowledge my team because they work tirelessly in trying to create a new curriculum, new programs that are addressing the development of the clinician scientist. Okay, PDD and MSc, we've already put out a PhD program, which we are waiting for feedback, and this would be structured. So whoever does this program would leave having upskilled in terms of laboratory investigations, translational research, and take this to the rest of the sub-Saharan African countries. This is a fairly ambitious, I think, program that we are thinking of working on, but this is just early stages. But this is a model that we might implement after some work, I would think. Now, if there's anything that epitomizes me, I would like to just leave the slide on for a minute or two, and you can read through it. But if I had my own way and I didn't need to earn money, then that's kind of where I'd like to be. And one needs to always end with a little bit of philosophy. But before I finish off with cheers, I need to tell my mom that's red grape juice. That's in those glasses. Because I have to go home with her, you see. So, thank you very much.
Congratulations, Professor Chetty. Can we please just give her another round of applause? I'm truly impressed how you took such a relevant, valuable, and complex subject matter and shared it with such a mixed audience. And I'm truly proud of your achievements. If you just indulge me for 1 minute, to sit on the IADR, I sit on the board, and we received the application for that funding. And hers was one of 6 other projects, and it's huge. And to sit there and to hear it was the best project, it was such a proud moment. Thank you. Next, it's my honor to call upon the respondent for this evening, who will speak about the work of Professor Chetty. Professor Karen Fegan, she's a pediatrician by profession, and her subspecialty is in medical genetics. She's based at UCT in Grooteskiel. We warmly welcome you to this platform, Professor Fegan.
Thank you so much. I feel really privileged to be here. I feel like I am standing here on behalf of the great adventurer, who's now in the sky. And I know Prof. Byton would be so proud of you, Manogari, as all of those colleagues that I can see here. I think I really want to thank you, Professor Chetty, for sharing that story with us. I think that the relationship between UWC dental faculty and the University of Cape Town has gone back many decades. But I think that you've taken it to a different level, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I call UCT Human Genetics home, and I think the way in which you spelled out your work, your achievements, have illustrated for us beautifully, not only that what you have actually managed to achieve in a very short time, but more specifically how the genomic revolution doesn't have to leave us behind. And I think that's really essential for those of us living in South Africa and locally. I think it's going to become embedded in all aspects of health, including oral and dental health, and I think it's really important not to be left behind in the future. Some of our trajectory has been quite similar. We started our lives focusing on being mothers. Then we moved beyond that into becoming what I defined as an accidental academic, and that we kind of fell into academia because we just did. But there our trajectories, I think, split. You went on to become an incredibly impressive and serious academic in a very short time. But I think we reunite in our shared passion for patients and the care that we provide for them. And I think that shines through that entire lecture, and I'm sure everyone would agree with me. You went on really very much to become a leader in your field and an academic to be taken very seriously. But you've taught us many, many things. You've shown us lots of life lessons as well. You've shown us the importance of mentorship. Started life perhaps as a mentee, learning lessons from someone who was selflessly able to share their support and passion with you and ignite your own passion. And I think that that has almost like had a drip effect on the next generation of dental scientists. And I'm sure that your faculty and the people around you are really grateful for that. I think you've also been able to demonstrate the importance of developing and mentoring young people and taking their talent and using it to ignite and keep your own passion alive so that you can achieve more together. You've also gone on to develop a department, which is no mean feat for anybody, and I'm sure people from the university really understand that. But you've developed a strong academic department, but rooted very solidly in locally relevant healthcare, but using techniques and technologies that are far more global and have a global reach. I think Professor Chetty has illustrated to us her focus on gathering and curating data, but at the same time providing service for a particularly vulnerable population. It's a population that I work with. Although individually rare, collectively people with rare and genetic disorders are common. We encounter them regularly, but their access to care is often very limited because people are unfamiliar with their condition, they're afraid to take them on, and I think that the establishment of a formal dental genetics clinic has made an enormous difference, in addition to the informal relationship we've had with our colleagues for a long time. You've explained how building up expertise and familiarity both with modern techniques and by recognition and management of genetic syndromes and conditions, you and your colleagues have been able to improve training, to be able to improve understanding in this setting. You've critically contributed to the generation of dental faculty graduates, I'm quite sure, that have a whole new take on the world and are able to go out and develop the innovative techniques we really need to drive the future of dental genetics. Professor Chetty has an excellent research track record, but even then, her focus on sustainability in the future kind of shines through those slides. I think that strongly supporting the concept of the dentist scientists and clinician scientists is really crucial to developing a good evidence base for the way in which we practice going forwards. I think that the clinician scientists in medicine have finally started to actually emerge and out of what started as a fairly small area in medicine, but I think that the dental and oral health has been left behind. And I think that probably is a reflection of hierarchy, lack of respect, lack of being taken seriously. And standing here as a doctor, I can't imagine how that came about, because without our colleagues in this particular area, we would be lost. I think that you've also spoken a little bit about the continent. You've taken what is important to you and you've said, I can't just keep it for myself, I have to share it throughout the continent. And I think that that is such an important task for us. I think we in the Global South can't be left behind, and I think you've demonstrated that really, really well to show not only that we do not need to be disregarded, but that actually we have skills and knowledge we can share with the Global North, and I think that is something that is so important and I think really valued by everyone. I think by establishing the African Society for Dental and Craniofacial Genetics, you've now really established a sustainability for the future of this field in Africa. And I think that that really speaks a lot to your long-term vision and your long-term goals. You've demonstrated in your research work responsiveness to need. You started your academic journey, and perhaps I know a bit more about your PhD than everybody else here, but you studied inherited connective tissue diseases, but you also went out into communities to ask them what they needed, what they wanted, what their lives were like. And I think that understanding that and gathering that data is really able to drive care in a way that people that don't connect with the world outside there understand. I think you focused, obviously, moving from just purely inherited connective tissue disorders onto rare diseases. And you've described for us the importance of clinical care in that space. You've shown us some examples by using something like enamel renal syndrome to show how a dental diagnosis can produce really important health care. And for me, it's the other way around. I may diagnose genetic disorders, but I have no idea of the oral pathology that needs to be taken care of. I think by establishing the Department of Craniofacial Biology, Pathology, Radiology, that's allowed you to really combine your skills as an oral pathologist and your interest in skills in genetics and genomics. You've beautifully described the closer interaction between what we may define as the basic sciences and the clinical sciences and how they can learn from one another, and integrating them really talks to the need for multidisciplinarity that really is going to drive the future. I think through your continental international collaborations, you've included bigger and wider research projects. And I think that's a really exciting space to be going in, but you still do it with the lens focused on locally relevant needs. The potential for translation into improved health is again a theme that runs through this lecture, and I think everyone would have noted that. Looking at your work on oral lymphomas, common complex disorders like preeclampsia, which really still kill many women in this country and even more so in the continent further along. But other chronic conditions like chronic kidney disease, which we never really thought had an important relationship to what it is that's happening inside your mouth. And I think we really need to appreciate what the vision that took to get to that point, to think about it like that. I think finally, I just really want to thank you, Professor Chetty, for sharing your passion, your enthusiasm for what I really think is absolutely essential work. Not only have the many patients that you and I have and continue to share care with benefited from your dedication, but I'm also sure that the extended dental and oral health community, both here at UWC and far wider throughout the continent and globally, will benefit, have benefited, and will continue to benefit from your talents. And I think that it's been an amazing lecture, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to just reflect on the importance of the work you're doing as both a local, a regional, a continental, and a global setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Fegan, for your kind words. I'd like to call upon Dr. Maat to come and pass the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Before I do the vote of thanks, can I call upon Prof. Inaugural to hand over the gift, and Prof. Chetty? Thank you so much. I see, Prof. Chetty, there is an envelope. I see when you speak about money, it happens. So well done to you. Good evening, everyone. I think we've come to the end of the program. I just want to obviously thank some people, some important people who made this event possible. I want to thank our rector, also acknowledging your last inaugural lecture. So I'm really blessed to have you. And also to Prof, our DVC, acting DVC, Prof. Pather, thank you for attending, and then all the other deans and part of the members of academia. I think it's important to note the family, the friends, and also the postgrad team of Manogari. Then I need to then thank our dean for just today and just your leadership, and he's smiling. I think my present is at the back. And then also to Professor Khan, who is also, I think it must be very special for you. You were all classmates, so this is really an enormous, I think, an honor for you. Thank you so much for being the program director. And I also want to thank Professor Manogari Chetty. I think it's an honor and privilege to do this and to be present today. It's a first for our faculty, so it is really significant. So thank you for your contribution. I think what's important, what you've mentioned, not only the clinician scientists, but what I really appreciate is the authentic way you have gone about I think highlighting your beginnings, incorporating motherhood, incorporating all the things that we sometimes don't speak about. So I do thank you. Really appreciate that. And then also to your respondent, I can see it's more than a respondent. We were joking about what a respondent is, but whatever it is, whatever you did, you responded very well. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I can see that the mentorship, there was a mentorship, and there was a friendship and sharing of knowledge, but also a shared passion. At the end of the day, there's a patient at the end, but leading with research. So thank you so much. And then a special vote of thank to our institutional advancement, who's made all the arrangements. And then from the Faculty of Dentistry, Mrs. Jolene Saville and a team, Mrs. Oosthuizen present, our photographers, and then also the Registrar's Office. I really thank you for your contributions. Prof. Chetty, I found her on Saturday and I asked her, don't say Prof. Chetty, Manogari, is there anyone specific you would want me to thank? And she did everything. But once again, I think it's important that she really appreciates a team that supports her. She sees you not only as students and colleagues, she appreciates your, I think, just your support. And then also she wanted me to single out Mr. Keegan Smith. Thank you for the warmth and the passion and the rest of the department. She really appreciated it. And then also, once again, Manogari, Chetty, I want to thank you for being the first pioneer to accept and actually go ahead with this inaugural lecture. We are inspired. Thank you. After the formalities and after the procession has left, please join us for refreshments. It is up through the stairs, up the stairs. Please feel welcome, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mart. Could we all rise for the procession as they leave the venue?